You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your educational journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. Privacy regulations are more than legal technicalities. They are guardrails that shape how cloud data can be collected, stored, processed, and moved across borders. Their purpose is to protect individual rights, establish accountability, and ensure that technological progress does not trample fundamental freedoms. In cloud environments where data routinely spans jurisdictions, these laws have profound influence on architecture and governance. They define lawful purposes for processing, restrict transfers to certain regions, and mandate rights for individuals to control their personal information. Think of privacy regulations as traffic laws for data. They don't stop movement, but they dictate routes, speeds, and rules to ensure safety and fairness. For organizations, compliance is not just about avoiding fines. It builds trust with customers and regulators, proving that services respect dignity and autonomy. Domain 6 brings these principles together, showing how privacy becomes operational reality in the cloud. The privacy regulation landscape is vast and diverse, yet certain laws dominate global practice. The European Union's General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, is often considered the most influential, setting global benchmarks for data protection. In the United States, the California Consumer Privacy Act, or CCPA, provides state-level rights such as access, deletion, and opt-out of data sale. Brazil's Lei Geral de Proteção de Dados, or LGPD, mirrors GDPR in many respects, adding regional specificity. These frameworks are not identical, but they share common themes: protecting individuals, enforcing transparency, and defining lawful bases for processing. Organizations operating globally must navigate this patchwork, aligning cloud operations with overlapping and sometimes conflicting rules. Much like international shipping requires knowledge of customs laws in each port, cloud providers and customers must manage privacy compliance in every jurisdiction they touch. The result is a compliance mosaic, demanding vigilance and adaptability. Lawful bases for processing form the foundation of GDPR and similar frameworks. They define the legal reasons organizations may process personal data, ensuring that processing is not arbitrary. Common bases include consent, contractual necessity, legal obligation, vital interests, public task, and legitimate interests. For example, an e-commerce provider may process data under contractual necessity to fulfill orders, or under consent for marketing communications. Each basis comes with distinct obligations. Legitimate interests require balancing tests, while legal obligations may require retention beyond normal business use. In cloud, lawful bases must be carefully mapped to data flows and documented to prove compliance. Choosing the wrong basis is like building on shaky ground. The entire structure risks collapse under regulatory scrutiny. By defining and documenting lawful bases, organizations provide legal legitimacy for every processing activity, ensuring cloud operations are both purposeful and defensible. Consent is one of the most recognizable lawful bases, but it carries strict conditions. Regulations require that consent be freely given, specific, informed, and unambiguous. It must be as easy to withdraw as to give, ensuring individuals retain real control. In practice, this means no pre-ticked boxes, no bundled consent for multiple purposes, and clear mechanisms for withdrawal. In cloud services, consent often governs activities like analytics, personalization, or third-party sharing. For example, a consent banner allowing tracking must specify which data is collected, for what purposes, and by whom. If withdrawal is ignored or difficult, compliance collapses. Consent is like signing a contract. You must know what you're agreeing to, and you must be able to walk away without penalty. Treating consent casually undermines both trust and legality. Managed properly, it becomes a powerful tool for respecting autonomy while enabling lawful innovation. Controller and processor roles define the primary legal responsibilities for personal data. The controller decides the purposes and means of processing, while the processor acts on behalf of the controller. In cloud, customers are typically controllers, while providers act as processors. This distinction assigns accountability. Controllers must ensure lawful bases, handle data subject rights, and define processing scope. Processors must follow instructions and maintain safeguards. Confusion between roles can lead to compliance gaps. For instance, a controller assuming a processor will handle erasure requests when the contract does not cover it. It is similar to a publisher and printer. The publisher determines content, while the printer executes production. Clear allocation of responsibilities, often codified in data processing agreements, prevents disputes and ensures compliance. Understanding these roles is fundamental in cloud, where distributed responsibilities demand precise legal and operational clarity. Cross-border transfers are a defining challenge for privacy in cloud computing. These occur whenever personal data is accessed or processed from a country outside the originating jurisdiction, even if the data itself never moves physically. For example, a support engineer in India accessing data hosted in the EU constitutes a transfer. Such flows trigger legal requirements under laws like GDPR, which restrict transfers unless safeguards are in place. Cloud's global nature means cross-border access is common, making compliance planning essential. Transfers are akin to shipping goods internationally. Regardless of where items rest in storage, if foreign hands handle them, customs rules apply. Ignoring transfer obligations risks regulatory penalties and loss of customer trust. By recognizing cross-border activities, even remote administrative access organizations prevent hidden compliance failures and ensure lawful global operations. Standard contractual clauses, or SCCs, are one of the most common tools for lawful international transfers under GDPR. SCCs are pre-approved contractual templates that bind both exporter and importer to EU-style data protection obligations. They cover issues like data subject rights, government access requests, and breach notification. SCCs provide a legal bridge when transferring data to jurisdictions without adequacy decisions. For example, an EU company relying on a US cloud provider may incorporate SCCs into their contract. SCCs are like standardized shipping manifests. They ensure consistent documentation and legal assurances across borders. However, organizations must implement them properly, conducting transfer impact assessments when required, and verifying that processors honor commitments. SCCs alone are not magic shields. They function effectively only when backed by operational and technical safeguards. Used correctly, they are indispensable tools for enabling global cloud services lawfully. Binding corporate rules, or BCRs, provide another mechanism for lawful transfers, but they apply internally within multinational organizations. BCRs are codes of conduct approved by regulators that authorize intra-group data transfers globally. For example, a company with offices in Europe, Asia, and the Americas may use BCRs to move data lawfully across its subsidiaries. Achieving BCR approval requires demonstrating comprehensive privacy governance, continuous training, and enforceable commitments. It is like receiving a trusted traveler status. Regulators grant long-term permission, but only after rigorous vetting. BCRs are resource-intensive to implement but valuable for global enterprises, as they reduce reliance on multiple SCCs across subsidiaries. For organizations serious about global cloud adoption, BCRs demonstrate maturity and commitment to privacy principles, aligning legal obligations with operational realities across diverse jurisdictions. Adequacy decisions are another pillar of transfer compliance. Regulators like the European Commission may recognize that certain jurisdictions provide essentially equivalent data protection, allowing transfers without additional safeguards. For example, Japan and Switzerland have adequacy status with the EU. These decisions simplify compliance by treating transfers as if they remain within the home jurisdiction. Adequacy is like passport-free travel within a trusted region, Once a country is recognized, data can flow freely without SCCs or BCRs. However, adequacy can change, as seen in the invalidation of EU-US Privacy Shield. Organizations must monitor these decisions continuously, since relying on outdated adequacy may result in unlawful transfers. Adequacy provides efficiency, but vigilance ensures that efficiency does not erode compliance. For cloud operations, adequacy decisions reduce friction in global services, but require constant regulatory awareness. Data localization mandates go beyond transfer mechanisms by requiring certain datasets to remain physically in specific jurisdictions. Countries like Russia, India, and China enforce localization laws that demand local storage for categories such as health data, payment data, or government records. Localization may also require that processing occur within national borders, not just storage. For cloud providers, this shapes architecture. Regional data centers, segregated services, and compliance attestations become necessary. Localization resembles zoning laws in city planning. Some activities are restricted to defined areas. While compliance can be costly, ignoring mandates risks severe penalties, including service bans. Localization is often justified by sovereignty concerns, but it complicates global service delivery. For customers, it requires careful provider selection and architectural planning. Data localization laws remind organizations that privacy compliance is not only about consent, but also about geography. Remote administrative access highlights how privacy rules extend beyond physical storage. Even if data is hosted in region, access from another jurisdiction may constitute a transfer. For example, a US-based support engineer troubleshooting a European customer database triggers GDPR transfer obligations. This subtlety surprises many organizations, as they assume location of storage determines compliance. In reality, access equals exposure. This is like safekeeping valuables in a local bank vault, but allowing foreign staff to handle them remotely. The oversight matters legally. Providers must disclose remote access arrangements, and customers must evaluate safeguards. Ignoring remote access risks unlawful transfers, even when data never moves. Awareness of this nuance is essential in cloud contracts and compliance planning, ensuring that privacy is enforced not only at rest, but also during remote operations. Data subject rights are a hallmark of modern privacy laws, granting individuals control over their personal information. These rights include access, rectification, erasure, restriction, portability, and objection. For example, a customer may request a copy of their data, correction of inaccuracies, or deletion when no longer needed. Cloud complicates fulfillment, since data may be distributed across regions and services. Regulations impose strict timelines, often 30 days, for responses, demanding efficient processes. These rights resemble consumer protections in other industries. Just as warranties ensure customers can demand repairs, privacy rights ensure individuals can demand accountability for their data. Organizations must build technical and procedural workflows to honor these requests reliably. Failure undermines both compliance and trust. For cloud services, supporting these rights is not optional. It is a critical element of lawful and ethical data management. Special category and sensitive data require heightened safeguards due to their potential for significant harm if misused. Categories include health data, biometric identifiers, racial or ethnic origin, and political opinions. Laws like GDPR impose stricter conditions for processing, often requiring explicit consent or specific legal bases. For example, storing biometric data for authentication may require encryption, access controls, and limited retention. These rules are like handling hazardous materials. Additional precautions are mandatory because consequences are more severe. In cloud, sensitive data demands careful provider selection, contractual commitments, and technical safeguards. Mishandling such data not only violates laws but also erodes public trust. By applying higher standards, organizations demonstrate respect for the dignity of individuals whose information carries greater risk. Sensitive data governance becomes a defining marker of compliance maturity in cloud environments. Children's data protections are another specialized area of privacy law. Many jurisdictions impose age thresholds for valid consent and require parental authorization for processing minors' information. For example, GDPR sets the default threshold at 16, though member states may lower it to 13. In the United States, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPPA, establishes consent requirements for children under 13. These rules recognize that children cannot fully understand the implications of data processing. In cloud, compliance requires mechanisms for verifying age, obtaining parental consent, and limiting profiling. It is similar to age restrictions on contracts or alcohol purchases. Legal protections reflect reduced capacity for informed decision-making. Ignoring children's protections risks severe penalties and reputational harm. Cloud services targeting youth audiences must embed safeguards from the start, treating compliance not as optional but as fundamental ethical responsibility. Records of processing activities, or ROPA, serve as documentation of how personal data is used. Required under GDPR and other laws, ROPA entries detail processing purposes, categories of data, recipients, retention periods, and safeguards. In cloud, maintaining ROPA ensures transparency across distributed services. It is like keeping a detailed inventory log. Every item is tracked, labeled, and justified. Regulators may request ROPA during investigations, and customers may rely on it to demonstrate accountability. Without ROPA, organizations risk losing sight of where data resides or how it is used, undermining compliance. Effective ROPA management also supports other obligations, such as responding to access requests or assessing transfer risks. For cloud operations, ROPA is a cornerstone of privacy governance, bridging abstract principles with concrete evidence of how data is managed in practice. Data Protection Impact Assessments, or DPIAs, evaluate high-risk processing activities for potential harms and required mitigations. They are mandatory under GDPR for processing that may significantly affect individuals, such as large-scale profiling or monitoring. A DPIA analyzes risks, considers alternatives, and documents safeguards. In cloud, DPIAs often apply when deploying new services, outsourcing to providers, or handling sensitive data. Think of them as architectural reviews before construction. Potential flaws are identified and corrected before launch. DPIAs not only satisfy legal requirements, but also strengthen trust by showing that privacy risks are proactively managed. They integrate legal, technical, and business perspectives, ensuring decisions balance innovation with rights. Without DPIAs, organizations risk introducing harmful services that regulators may block or penalize. For cloud adoption, DPIAs institutionalize responsibility, embedding privacy into system design and governance from the outset. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Data processing agreements, or DPAs, are foundational contracts that clarify roles and responsibilities between controllers and processors. They map categories of data, define security measures, and list sub-processors authorized to handle information. For example, a DPA with a cloud provider may specify encryption requirements, breach notification obligations, and restrictions on data use beyond customer instructions. These agreements transform legal mandates into enforceable commitments, reducing ambiguity when regulators investigate. In practice, DPAs are like detailed job descriptions. They prevent disputes about who is accountable for specific tasks. Without them, controllers risk failing to meet their obligations because they cannot prove processors were contractually bound. Well-crafted DPAs provide not only legal defensibility, but also operational clarity, guiding both sides in implementing safeguards consistently. They serve as the cornerstone of compliance in shared responsibility models, ensuring obligations are visible, documented, and enforceable. Sub-processor management extends DPAs by requiring providers to disclose which third parties are involved, obtain approval for changes, and notify customers of additions or removals. This transparency ensures that data does not quietly flow to unvetted vendors. For example, a provider may use a subcontractor for customer support or infrastructure hosting, and customers have the right to know and object if necessary. Ongoing oversight includes monitoring certifications and assessing security posture. Sub-processor management is similar to supply chain quality control. Organizations demand visibility into every contributor, not just the main contractor. Without oversight, hidden dependencies can undermine compliance, introducing unexpected risks and regulatory violations. With structured management, organizations extend trust through the entire chain, ensuring privacy obligations cascade beyond the immediate provider. Sub-processor clauses thus preserve accountability and reduce blind spots in complex, interconnected cloud ecosystems. Government access risk assessments evaluate the possibility that authorities in a provider's jurisdiction could compel access to customer data. Under GDPR, organizations must consider whether legal systems outside the EU provide equivalent protections. Providers may respond with transparency reports, contractual commitments, or technical safeguards to limit exposure. For example, U.S. providers may face obligations under laws like the Cloud Act, raising concerns for European customers. Assessing this risk is like evaluating the safety of storing valuables in another country. Laws determine who may open the vault, regardless of customer intent. Without such assessments, organizations may unknowingly transfer data into legal regimes that compromise rights. Structured risk evaluation ensures decisions about providers are not just technical, but also legal and geopolitical, reinforcing that privacy compliance requires awareness of the broader legal context in which cloud providers operate. Encryption and key residency models provide technical safeguards for privacy compliance but do not eliminate legal obligations. Options such as hold your own key (HYOK) or bring your own key (BYOK) ensure customers retain greater control over cryptographic materials, reducing provider visibility into data. However, regulators emphasize that technical safeguards cannot substitute for lawful transfer mechanisms. For example, even if data is encrypted, if providers can be compelled to produce it, transfer obligations still apply. Encryption is like locking a suitcase. It adds protection, but if law enforcement has the authority to demand the key, the lock alone is insufficient. That said, strong key management improves assurance, reducing practical risks of unauthorized access. By combining encryption with compliant transfer mechanisms, organizations strengthen privacy defenses, ensuring technical and legal obligations work in tandem rather than in isolation. Access transparency logs and just-in-time approvals enhance visibility into privileged access, particularly for cross-border operations. Transparency logs record when provider staff access customer systems, documenting who accessed what, when, and why. Just-in-time approvals restrict privileged access to specific tasks and time windows, reducing standing privileges. For example, a provider engineer troubleshooting an outage may request temporary access, with actions logged for audit. These measures reassure customers that administrative access is not hidden or uncontrolled. They are like surveillance cameras and guest passes in secure buildings. Visitors may enter, but only with oversight and for legitimate reasons. Transparency and approval mechanisms build accountability, proving that providers manage sensitive access responsibly. In privacy compliance, they provide evidence that remote administrative access considered a transfer under GDPR is carefully monitored and justified, strengthening defensibility in regulatory contexts. Transfer impact assessments, or TIAs, document the legal and technical context of cross-border data flows. They evaluate factors such as the destination country's laws, provider safeguards, and residual risks. For instance, a TIA may examine whether encryption mitigates risks of foreign government surveillance when transferring data from the EU to the US. TIAs are like travel advisories. They identify dangers, assess protections, and recommend precautions before embarking on a journey. Regulators increasingly expect organizations to conduct TIAs when relying on standard contractual clauses. Without them, transfers may lack defensible justification, leaving organizations exposed to enforcement. TIAs also encourage proactive design, prompting consideration of alternatives such as regional hosting or pseudonymization. By documenting reasoning and safeguards, TIAs provide evidence of accountability, ensuring organizations not only comply in principle, but also demonstrate diligence in practice. Telemetry and backup localization extend privacy obligations to supporting datasets. Logs, metrics, and snapshots often contain personal data, even if indirectly. Regulations require that these artifacts follow the same residency and transfer rules as primary data. For example, if application logs include IP addresses, storing them outside required jurisdictions may constitute a violation. Backup localization similarly ensures redundancy does not undermine compliance. It is like photocopying sensitive documents. The copies must be protected as carefully as the originals. Organizations must design telemetry pipelines and backup strategies with privacy in mind, ensuring data does not silently cross boundaries. Cloud providers increasingly offer region-specific logging and backup services to support compliance. Ignoring these requirements creates hidden risks, as auxiliary data often escapes attention until auditors uncover it. Proper localization ensures all data, not just core workloads, respects residency and transfer obligations. Consent management platforms support compliance by recording individual preferences, binding them to specific purposes, and tracking withdrawal events. These platforms provide auditable evidence that consent was freely given, specific, informed, and reversible. For example, a user opting into email marketing has their decision logged, along with the purpose and timestamp. If they later withdraw, the system records the change and propagates updates to relevant systems. Consent management is like maintaining a signed ledger. Every decision is documented and enforceable. In cloud, these tools integrate with applications and data stores, ensuring that services honor preferences consistently. Without structured management, consent becomes fragmented and unreliable, undermining compliance. With it, organizations demonstrate respect for autonomy and transparency. Consent management platforms transform legal requirements into operational workflows, proving that user choices are not only recognized but also consistently enforced. Cookie and tracking controls align with privacy regulations such as the EU e-Privacy Directive and emerging global equivalents. These rules restrict the use of identifiers that track individuals across websites or services, requiring notice, choice, and respect for opt-outs. For example, websites must not drop non-essential cookies until consent is granted, and must honor do not track or global privacy control signals where applicable. In cloud, these obligations extend to analytics services, advertising platforms, and third-party integrations. Cookie controls are like visitor badges. Individuals must agree before being tagged and monitored. Failing to implement proper controls risks fines and reputational damage, especially as regulators increase enforcement. By embedding cookie and tracking governance into platforms, organizations respect user rights while reducing compliance risk. Effective controls balance business needs for insight with individuals' right to privacy and freedom from intrusive surveillance. Data subject access request processes operationalize individual rights by enabling people to access, correct, or delete their personal data within statutory timelines. Under GDPR, organizations typically have 30 days to respond. Cloud environments complicate this because data may be dispersed across services and geographies. Effective DSAR processes require strong data inventories, automation, and workflows for locating and exporting information. For example, a DSAR might trigger automated searches across databases, generating a consolidated package of an individual's records. These processes resemble customer service systems. Requests are logged, tracked, and fulfilled with defined timelines. Failure to respond properly undermines compliance and erodes trust. By building DSAR capabilities into their operations, Organizations demonstrate accountability and transparency. DSAR handling is a visible and high-impact element of privacy law, showing individuals and regulators that rights are respected in practice, not just principle. Breach notification duties are central to privacy regulations, specifying content, timing, and recipients of notifications when data is compromised. For example, GDPR requires notification to supervisory authorities within 72 hours of becoming aware of a breach, unless risk is unlikely. Many laws also require informing affected individuals directly. Notifications must include details such as scope, affected data, and mitigation steps. These duties are like fire alarms. They may not stop the incident, but ensure prompt awareness and response. In cloud, breach notifications require coordination between providers and customers, often codified in contracts. Delayed or incomplete reporting risks regulatory penalties and reputational harm. Properly executed notifications demonstrate responsibility and commitment to transparency. They also empower individuals to protect themselves, such as by changing passwords or monitoring accounts. Breach notification laws ensure organizations cannot hide failures, reinforcing accountability in the digital era. Retention and minimization policies enforce two core privacy principles: purpose limitation and timely deletion. Data must be kept only as long as necessary for the stated purpose, then securely erased. In cloud, this requires automated lifecycle policies for databases, storage, and backups. For example, customer data collected for a promotion must be deleted once the campaign ends, unless lawful obligations require retention. Minimization also restricts the scope of data collected in the first place, reducing risk exposure. These policies are like decluttering rules: keep only what you need, discard what you don't. Without them, organizations accumulate unnecessary risk and costs while undermining compliance. Retention and minimization are often verified during audits, requiring evidence of schedules, deletions, and justification for exceptions. By embedding these practices, organizations respect privacy principles while reducing operational burden and exposure. Routing and geofencing controls enforce residency by steering DNS queries and network paths to specific regions. For example, a geofencing rule may ensure European customers always connect to EU data centers, preventing traffic from flowing through other jurisdictions. These technical safeguards complement contractual and legal obligations, reducing the chance of accidental transfers. Routing controls are like toll gates on highways. They ensure traffic follows approved paths. In cloud, misconfigured routing can inadvertently create compliance violations as data traverses disallowed regions. Geofencing also supports performance optimization, aligning data residency with latency reduction. Together, routing and geofencing demonstrate how compliance principles translate into practical network controls. They show that privacy governance is not only contractual but also embedded in architecture, making compliance enforceable in real-time operations rather than just in policies. Audit readiness in privacy contexts packages contracts, assessments, rosters, and logs into evidence for regulators and auditors. This includes DPAs, TIAs, consent records, access logs, and breach notification histories. Readiness ensures that when audits occur, organizations can demonstrate compliance quickly and confidently. It is like keeping an organized filing cabinet. Everything is labeled and retrievable when inspectors arrive. Without readiness, audits devolve into last-minute scrambles, undermining credibility and increasing the risk of penalties. In cloud, audit readiness is essential because distributed environments make evidence collection complex. By centralizing documentation and maintaining traceability, organizations demonstrate not only compliance but also maturity in governance. Audit readiness is both a defensive and proactive strategy, reinforcing trust with regulators, customers, and partners by proving privacy is embedded, not improvised. From an exam perspective, candidates must understand how lawful bases, transfer mechanisms, and safeguards map into cloud operations. Scenarios may test whether SCCs, BCRs, or adequacy decisions apply, or how DSARs and DPIAs should be operationalized. Questions may highlight risks like remote administrative access or subprocessors and ask which clauses or safeguards are required. Success requires not memorization but reasoning, knowing why encryption alone is insufficient or how consent must be managed across systems. Exam relevance emphasizes translating abstract privacy principles into operational safeguards, bridging law with technology. Candidates who master this integration demonstrate readiness to design and assess compliant cloud services, ensuring that privacy rights are preserved even in complex cross-border environments. In conclusion, privacy regulations define lawful processing, restrict international transfers, and empower individuals with rights over their personal data. Cloud complicates these obligations but also provides tools to meet them. DPAs, subprocessors, encryption, geofencing, and consent management. Transfer mechanisms like SCCs, BCRs, and adequacy decisions provide legal foundations, while technical safeguards and audit readiness make compliance operational. Organizations that integrate these elements achieve not only regulatory compliance but also customer trust and resilience. Privacy is not a barrier to cloud adoption but a framework for sustainable growth. By embedding lawful processing, defined transfer mechanisms, and auditable safeguards, organizations ensure that their global operations respect individual rights and withstand regulatory scrutiny. This balance makes privacy compliance a cornerstone of modern cloud governance and a vital focus for exam preparation. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.